All right. So let's get started. And just want to say once again, welcome. This is our team that you're going to have on the call. All three of us are pinned now, but in just a second, I'm going to unpin my colleagues, Amy and Grace. They'll be appearing at a later point. The three of us really work on most of Potrero Group's strategy projects together. I've led strategic planning for a number of organizations, working closely with Grace and Amy. Grace, as an example, just finished doing strategic planning for Sempervirens Fund, a wonderful conservation organization in California, as well as the National Park Service's Directorate of Partnerships and Civic Engagement in DC. Amy has recently finished strategic planning for Save Ellis Island, a great nonprofit supporting the Ellis Island National Park Service unit, which we'll be talking a little bit more about in the future, as well on the West Coast, History San Jose, a living history museum. And are continuing to do work across the United States with nonprofits, small businesses, entrepreneurs, and governments alike. I'm going to unpin my colleagues and move into the main part of the presentation here. So let me just do that real quick. All right, Potrero Group, if you don't know us already, we really are leadership consulting for change makers across the spectrum of organizations trying to make change in this country and across the world. We are a small but mighty team. There are 10 of us in total. We work, if you go to the next slide, primarily in 6 major places. The first 3 is what this team really represents. We do strategic plans in the classic sense of that, where you get a wonderful document after a 9-month process or a 6-month process that tells about the future of your organization. But we also do facilitation, some of which is strategic visioning in a day, or trying to figure out how to think long-term and act short-term. And lastly, this group does a lot of reports and studies, everything from impact reports to capital campaign case statements to much larger, broader senses of the impact sector across states and nationwide. Our organization also does a very healthy search practice, both for executives in nonprofits and boards of directors in nonprofits, where we bring in a lot of our corporate partners to be able to support nonprofits and the great work they do. Our agenda for today is just finish our introductions. We're going to break this down into the 2 steps, probably not a surprise here, thinking long-term and acting short-term. I'll be doing a little bit of the long-term thinking and passing it on to my colleague Grace for the short-term. We'll talk about some of the lessons we've learned from practice with our clients and from our clients. Again, I'm not sure if she's here, but we'll have Save Ellis Island's wonderful leader, Janice Colello, will be having her ears ringing because we're going to focus in on that, but we could certainly talk about a lot of our clients in different ways. And then Amy will join us to really lean into one particular skill set that we've seen in practice. We'll do summary, and we want to leave some healthy time for Q&A. So finally, I'll just say, if you don't know me, my name is Daniel Student. That is my real last name, I promise. I'm the managing director of Potrero Group. I've been here for 6 years, and I'm excited to be sharing with you some ideas and some things we've seen in the field. So I want to start by talking about myths of long-term strategy. And you noticed I already put the word excuses. And I am going to say, first of all, that these are excuses I make every day. I'm not trying to cast aspersions on anyone in this room for these excuses we have. It's what we all do to really not deal with long-term strategy. So for instance, in this first idea, it's something that we all really want to do, right? We all understand this would be really impactful for us. It will give us some space to think. It's really going to be important to understand where we're going. But as a result, we always say we don't have the time. It comes down to time. We just don't have the time to do this. We have to focus on other things. With that in mind, it's also something that we say, look, the future is unpredictable. There's a lot of people that push back around long-term strategy because what's the point? Things are going to change. It's a little bit of a game. Maybe we get to, do these future thinking things and it's really fun in the room, but it doesn't really answer any of our questions. So again, we say, time. It's not worth our time in this case. So it all goes back to time. We say we don't have the time. It's not worth our time. You get where it's going. We say we get its value, but everything we already do needs our time. So we're going to focus on these other things, particularly in times of instability. We just got to focus on what's in front of us. So even if it's valuable, we have other valuable things to do. And again, I've said the word focus 4 times now. Right now, if you're in instability, you're staying afloat. That's what you're trying to do. This might be something you do next time. And next time is just going to keep getting pushed off. We don't know how long instability is going to last. We all had that lesson just a few years ago. We had absolutely no idea. Looking back on the COVID pandemic, we have a sense of how it went, but in the moment, we never really knew when instability was going to go away. So I think this is a lesson well learned, that time is something that will always be an obstacle, and we need to not let that be an excuse. So let's jump in to thinking long term and let's get practical with some tools that we use and we encourage our clients and our friends and colleagues to use. And this is all stuff that we've seen or borrowed from others. So again, right now, as you go through this, if you get inspired to share another tool and a link in chat for ways to think long term, please do so. So the first thing, and some of you may laugh if I'm at a conference right now, and I think a couple of the attendees of the conference just saw me present on this. I presented this at another conference we have attendees from recently. It's one of my favorite things. It comes from adaptive leadership. Ronald Heifetz is the man who came up with this. It's called balcony versus dance floor. So think about for a second in times of instability that you are on, like you're on a dance floor. You're moving around, trying your best as a leader, whether you lead a team or an organization. You're trying to just empathize what everyone's going through. You're the person that has to emotionally connect. You're trying to move out of your comfort zone. You're turning to one person saying, this thing feels really unstable. I don't know how to deal with it, but I'm going to address it. I'm going to put my full force and my love and my might and my desire to fix into it. And I'm going to pull resources. Sometimes I'm going to look at this person, turn back to this person, try to link them together, see if they can connect, etc. It's a really important way to work in these moments. It cannot be undervalued, but it is not everything. And then there's a gap, right? It's hard to get on the balcony unless you're a superhero. You can't just jump from the dance floor to the balcony, quite literally. I'm in a hotel room right now doing this presentation at a conference, and I am at the top floor. And the hotel room has this nice glass thing in the elevator when you go down. And I'm literally looking at the balcony onto the dance floor. And I always think about this every time I go down because it gives you that chance to not be in the moment of interacting with folks, to collect that data, to reevaluate what you're seeing rather than turning to every single person and trying to address it in the moment and make those connections. And so this might feel a little bit like a spacey thing to say, like, how is this practical? Well, one of the things we encourage leaders to do is actually put balcony time on their calendar. Monday morning, 9 a.m., put 30 minutes on your calendar and say, this is balcony time, and hold on to that. For some, that might be a meditative moment. For someone like me, I use it to look at my calendar for the week and say, am I doing meetings that really matter to this week? Is there something I should push back? Is there a partner I haven't thought about in a while that actually would really help me address this moment? So it allows you to really take that look. And I really highly encourage you to make this practical and do this as a practice for yourself. The next step you'd want to do after you take that balcony time is to use that balcony time to look beyond the surface. Again, this is not mine. It's a very old sociological metaphor called the iceberg metaphor. Comes actually out of cultural anthropology originally, and it's used in multiple levels. This one we like to point out because you have these formal structures. You may be doing this really well. A lot of people on this call, you have a great strategic plan. You've been doing it. You've been living by it. It's been working. And now in this instability, it feels like it's shaking, even though it was a strong strategy to choose. And that's because right now, the things under the water in the iceberg, right? The Titanic has slammed into it. All the stuff that's under there is really coming to the surface. And in those words, attitudes, norms, perceptions, traditions, the things that your organization falls back on in times of crisis are really what's coming forward. And you might say, I think we're doing our strategy, but we seem to also fall into these old patterns or fall into these things that are not where we wanted to go. And so just analyzing and taking a look what's happening, where you're really focusing, and how they are or are not your strategy starts being a really valuable exercise you can do in that balcony time. And with that, you have an opportunity to clarify what's meaningful. So again, using the metaphors, things coming up to the surface and bubbling up, you can start thinking, is this a signal or is this noise? And no one's been able to answer that question for you, and you don't necessarily need to fully be able to answer it yourself. But I like these little icons a little bit because they're kind of similar, right? The signals and the noise of these two individuals, one's just slightly more hidden, one's a little bit more in your face. The noise is always going to be a little bit more in your face, and the signal is the one you're actually going to have to look at. And you have that strategy. So start using that strategy to say, is this something that is just distracting from a strategy, or is it making me feel in my gut, in my heart, that our strategy is not going to work fully for this, or our strategy is going to need to shift a little bit with the new reality we're in? The next step you can do is explore your resources. And again, I bet a few people are smiling as they look at this because we certainly have hit these 2 points for those who've seen Potrero Group's presentations in the past, but they feel extremely apt for the moment. These come from the book that Cleve Justice, our principal, and I co-authored, and we spent so much time on these somewhat silly-looking cartoons. So I just want to explain to you for a second because I think they tell a good story. The first step of exploring your resources is really figuring out where you, as an individual or as a team or as an organization, are fitting in the system that is confronting the complexity that you're facing. So where are the people that are part of what you're trying to accomplish and go through this challenge together? Where are the structures of operations and technology that you need? Where are your partners? Where are the other teams? And how do you connect out to them? And how do they connect to each other? And make this real. This can be the back of a napkin in one of your balcony times. Sit there and draw these lines and understand how everything's connected. Get a sense of what's available to you. Again, you're noticing we're not doing any action with this yet. This is the value of long term, is you're taking the time to really understand before you take action. But then if you think about that frame, if you think about that second image, it's almost like you took that frame off, right? And it like, oh, there was a frame around this the whole time. Because once you do that and you do this next step of opening up and saying, where are people I've thought beyond what I've ever thought before could be in our network? What are the organizations that may feel slightly different than us, right? They have different frames, they have different traditions and languages around them. Where are those people going on, and how am I drawn to that? So maybe that's your next week's balcony time, to kind of take a look at the broader scope. And really now you start finding yourself with different answers than you might have had if you just stayed on that dance floor. As you start thinking about the things you can implement to help with your long term, you're starting to see that there are resources that go beyond what your vision is, the resources that can help you address the things that were below the surface originally. And having that all lined up allows you to make more informed choices. And now we can envision that path to the future. And this is where it gets exciting, because all of a sudden you have the end of it, but you also have the beginning of it a bit. And you have that first action potentially laid out. You may not be ready to decide what that is yet, but if you can get to that vision realized, and I want to take a moment to say vision realized for our nonprofit partners, we all have vision statements. This is not what we're saying. Vision statement is a thing that you want your organization to accomplish in the future. This is what happens afterwards. This is the stuff you can't control. It's the ripple effect of the good work everyone here who does impact work can accomplish. It's the thing that people walk into the world after they left your organization and the impact that they have, or the influence that the work you do has on others to build that out. Having that understanding in this moment becomes the way you build the roadmap to what to do now, because you're having the power of saying, we know that we're going to make impact through this, that we're going to survive, and we're going to change the world. And that it becomes a calling card for you. It becomes a motivation for your allies and partners, but it also becomes how you make choices. And we'll start showing that here. So how do you do this? So you have this idea in the future of where you're going to go. A lot of organizations sitting here, a lot of anyone here in the entrepreneurial space will go with this approach, which is your business growth will get you there. But a lot of organizations sitting here may not go with this. They may say, okay, what are we going to do? What are we going to do for our community? What are the things we're going to put out in the world? You need to do both. So this is an example of, we need to grow to be able to reach this vision we want to realize. And here's an ABC step. Obviously, maybe A, B, C, D, E. And these are some of the milestones, some of the actions we want to take, the things that are the most important, that will show that we are moving forward, that will connect to each other, that build out. So you can start envisioning your business growing this way. Alternatively, if you're here from a team, to go to the next slide, that's another way to do it, is your department growth, right? Is the kind of people you have, the amount of folks you have, the amount of things you're able to do. I like this one too, because it doesn't have to be all or nothing around the stuff you're doing outside of your organization or team and the stuff you're doing to build it. It can be both, right? This is an example where they're doing things internally with their operations, with their staff, but they're also doing things that increase what their impact is on the other teams in the business or on the clients that they're trying to serve. So both can be in these growth models. Again, it just shouldn't be overly reliant. If you're a nonprofit, often you say, what are we doing out in the world? That's all we're going to envision in our growth. And if you are a social entrepreneur, often you're focused on the business growth. It needs to be a little bit of both. And now you can start seeing this vision of this journey and how to get there. So we call it backcasting. This is, again, not ours. You can Google it, look it up. But what I like to explain about it is, I come from an arts background. I was thinking about trying to be a TV writer for a long time. If you ever seen a picture of a TV writer's room, you see a bunch of index cards on the wall. And the idea is, in to tell a good story, this happens, which leads to this, which makes this happens, which leads to this, which makes this happen. But now think about it as if you're in the future. We call this Museum of the Future. You're standing in the future and you're looking backwards and you're saying, wow, 20 years ago, some great leader on this webinar with Potrero Group came up with this idea of how they were going to get to where we are today. And if we think about the growth of our marketing team, we can go back to 20 years ago when they did this first action, and you will trace this path forward. So you start 20 years in the future, whatever that future vision for you, when you realize your vision is, and you say, what's the last milestone that got us there? The last milestone is we became the most, subscribed to social media channel in the United States in the conservation world. And before that, the action that took us there was that we, amplified, added 2 people to our social media team, made it, the full-time interactions with every comment we got forward. And before that, we did this, or this milestone happened. And before long, you're back to right now. And you're able to see the action that you're able to take now that has that long-term impact. And now your map is starting to look very interesting. We're back at this map. But this is now to tell the full story of the long-term vision. This allows you to go, okay, things are all over the place right now. There are all these winding roads. The things that I do as a leader in this moment are going to feel to many people in my stakeholders like they're all over the map, literally. They're going to feel to me that way. And sometimes by necessity, they will, because I have to deal with the instability that I'm facing. But in each of these actions in stability, as far away as they appear now, they're all colliding in the same place and getting closer and closer together. So suddenly you have a tool. It took you a little bit of work to get there, and the time that we all want to think we don't have, to say, how can I be purposeful around the choices that I'm making here, and purposeful around the very disparate decisions I need to make so that they're all headed in the right direction. And so with that in mind, I want to turn it over to my colleague, Grace, who I'm going to pin here, who's going to give you that exact next step, which is, all right, we now know what we need to kind of put on these lines. How are we going to make decisions around them, and how are we going to act? Grace, over to you.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate it. Hi, everyone. It's good to see some familiar faces and some new ones here. And so I am going to talk a little bit about tools that you can use in the short term, because Daniel just shared some really great strategies about how to think about long term, step back, see the system, imagine where we're headed. But as everyone on this call knows, strategy does not just live in the long term, it also lives in the short term as well. So especially during uncertain times, we need ways that can help us act right now to prioritize, make decisions, and keep moving. So we're going to shift gears a little bit. I'm going to share a few tools with you, and this is going to help you think through acting in that short term without losing that thread of your long-term strategy. Because again, we all know the reality is when you have a solid plan or compelling vision, things come up, environments shift, crises hit, new opportunities pop up. And in those moments, you might be thinking, should we pivot? Is it worth doing? What do we focus on? How do we make these decisions? So the first tool that I want to share with you all here is a way for you to find clarity in these uncertain moments by just focusing on your mission. And for those of us maybe more in the government or for-profit space, maybe the word you use here is impact. Nonprofits a lot of the time use mission as a mission statement. At the end of the day, this is the change that you're trying to accomplish in the world. This is why you exist. And so this idea is that your mission is not just a statement that's on your website. It really is a practical decision-making tool for you. It helps you figure out what to say yes to, and just as importantly, what to say no to. So when organizations are feeling a little murky or uncertain and thinking, what do we do? What do we try? How do we keep all of these plates spinning in this really uncertain time? A lot of the times, the most effective question to just return back to is, what are we here to do? So for example, new opportunities are popping up. You're thinking about maybe pursuing equitable access as a part of your strategy, or building out your advocacy team, what that would look like. And you're trying to get a little clarity on, is this acting in the moment, or is this a long-term thing that we should invest in? A simple 3-question mission filter can really help you and your team make some clarity decisions here. So thinking through, does this idea align with our core purpose? Is this going to deepen our impact or dilute it? If we succeed at this, is it going to reflect what we stand for? And these questions here may seem basic, but they really do bring clarity. And one way to think about making this real and having it with kind of a low investment as well, you don't have to do a whole strategic planning session. You can just put these 3 questions at the top of your next board meeting or leadership meeting agenda, and really encourage the group to use these questions as a lens for discussion as you're thinking about making strategic decisions of opportunities that are popping up. And the next tool that I'm going to share with you all is really just as simple, but it's just as grounding as well. It's called Mission Market Momentum. And this is a tool that really helps teams pause, zoom out, and ask these three questions when deciding what opportunities to pursue. So on one side of the triangle, you have mission, why do we exist? The market, who are we serving now and whose needs are changing? And then momentum, where are we seeing traction, energy, signals of promise that's coming up right now? And so what's really powerful about this is that it helps you identify imbalance. So maybe if you're pursuing an idea, you may find out that you're really chasing momentum, like it's a media buzz or a funder trend, but it's not really tied to your mission. Or maybe you'll find out that your audience has shifted, but your strategy hasn't really caught up yet. And again, this doesn't need to be a full strategic planning exercise. It could just be a 5-minute gut check. If you're sitting with your team in a moment of stress or overload or change, thinking about what do we react to, this can be really helpful to help you recenter before stepping on that reaction. Great. So we just talked through a couple of tools to help you clarify what matters. But once you've found that clarity, the question really becomes, how do we move forward with it? So for example, let's say your team got some clarity. Yes, we want to build out this advocacy within our strategy, within our team. But how do we do that? Do we do that through partnerships? Are we going to do that by hiring another staff member? Are we going to do that by really prioritizing city relationships with these people? And that's really the messy part is, as we all know, there's always too many ideas, there's limited capacity, there's different opinions, there's competing priorities. How do we make decisions on what we feel is the right way to move forward? So the next couple of tools I'm going to share with you are really about moving from that clarity to implementation. They're helping you to kind of sort through all that noise and figure out what is worth actually doing. All right, so the first tool here is impact versus organizational achievability. It's a 2x2 chart. It helps you assess some strategic ideas or initiatives based on two different areas. On the y-axis here, we have impact, which is defined as how meaningful and aligned is this with our purpose. And then on the x-axis here, we have achievability, which is just saying how realistically can we pull this off, given our current resources, time, and capacity. So you can see here, again, simple matrix, you end up with 4 quadrants here. And what's really useful about this is that it helps you prioritize with your team. And especially in times of uncertainty or instability, you can be pulled in a dozen different directions, and just having this as a conversation starter can be really helpful. So I'm going to start here in quadrant 2 and 4 because they are the easiest and most straightforward. If you look up here at quadrant 2, high impact, high achievability, these are clearly your yeses. These are your big wins that are both aligned and doable for you. Definitely prioritize these. And then if you look down here in quadrant 4, low impact, low achievability, these are your clearest no's. So they drain energy, not a lot of return, just let them go. But what is interesting and where kind of the real tension comes in are these quadrants 1 and 3 here. And this is where context, whether you're in a more stable position or you're in a moment of crisis and trying to navigate that, can really matter when you're thinking about these 2 quadrants here. So let's start with quadrant 3, low impact, high achievability. So think about this in normal times. This would be an area for your quick wins, things that are easy to execute, but maybe don't move the needle too much for your impact. And maybe you think about pursuing them in support of a larger goal, but they're really not your top priorities. However, if you think about this in terms of a time of instability, these more low lift wins can feel really tempting. And there's a really good reason for that, because they can provide some meaningful momentum, they can give a sense of progress, they can create that stability and productivity when everything else feels uncertain. And that can be really valuable because, at the end of the day, these quick wins may be exactly what your organization needs to boost that morale, build confidence, show that forward movement. So that's the plus of these. On the flip side of this, on the risk side, these kind of easy to execute tasks may distract from what the organization truly needs to do in the long term. So just because something may feel satisfying in the moment doesn't mean that it's necessarily strategic. So really the core question is when you're looking in this quadrant and what ideas, initiatives that you have mapped on here is, are we reacting to the moment and do we need that for momentum? Or are we really not investing in something that has going to have lasting impact for us? Okay, and then moving to our last quadrant here, quadrant 1, high impact, low achievability. So in stable times, this is really where that bold, transformative strategy can live. So these initiatives are things that are really high impact, but it's going to take a lot of significant resources, significant time and investment. But if the potential impact is high, it may be worth investing in. But in moments of crisis or instability, these ideas do present attention because you're thinking, these still may be worth doing, but the timing just might not be right. You may be thinking the instinct is let's just push forward anyway. We can't lose sight of the long term and the impact this will give us. And that's really valid. But the trade-off is even if it's the most aligned, most high impact idea, it can be a liability if your team is just not resourced or ready to deliver it right now because of the uncertainty of the time. So instead of kind of charging ahead with that, this may be the time to more hold the idea, take much smaller step towards it, or just keep it on the horizon while your organization gets more stability. So just to close on this slide, I want to just throw caution to the wind here and say, this is a simple 2x2 chart. It's not going to give you all the answers, but it is going to give you a more structured way to talk about those trade-offs. And really, in times of uncertainty, that's what strategy is. It's making thoughtful, intentional trade-offs that help you move forward without burning out your team. And then the last tool that I want to share with you all today is called the Moscow method, which is must have, should have, could have, and won't have. Again, this is a very simple tool, but it's actually very powerful when you get together with your team and you try to sort out what are the strategic ideas and initiatives we have. 4 categories here, pretty straightforward. Looking here at the must-haves, these are the non-negotiables. These are core to your mission. These are necessary to keep things running. Should-haves are valuable, but maybe not immediately urgent. Could-haves are just the nice-to-haves, that if you have the time or capacity, maybe you could do it. And then the won't-haves are good ideas, but just not a priority, don't have the capacity, not going to do it right now. So in times of relative stability, this framework is really helpful to get alignment across different groups and different priorities, especially when there's a lot of ideas, opinions, and limited capacity. It can help you sort that. But this is especially valuable in times of uncertainty or crisis when the pressure to do more is very high and resources are stretched thin. Because really, what you would want to think about doing is doubling down on these must-haves here. These are really the mission critical things, the ones that are tied to your survival. And in moments of uncertainty, maybe you be a little bit more selective about your should-haves or your could-haves. Because really the reality is there's only one category here that's truly necessary and the rest are just choices. So this tool can really give you permission to be a little bit more disciplined and maybe even a little bit more ruthless about what you're committing to. And it's not saying that it's going to limit your ambition, but it's just going to protect your focus during those critical times. So to kind of wrap up my section here, I just want to, again, throwing that caution to the wind to say these are really great tools, but that's all they are. They are tools. They're not gospel. They're not going to capture everything for you. They're going to have blind spots. But what's really valuable about them is that they're really powerful conversation starters. And in strategy, that is oftentimes really all that you need is just a way into the conversation so you can start to make those decisions with your team. So now I'm going to pass it back to Daniel, who's going to take you through some of the views from our clients in our different organizations, maybe like yours, about how these things come into practice.
Excellent. Before I move forward, I just want to invite everyone that basically, if you want to read the best book on this, there's this very fascinating business book called Harold and the Purple Crayon. You may have heard of it. It's really worth taking a read. You can put it on your screen right now because it's obviously not a business book, but just kind of put yourself in that moment, right? So I love the way that story is told. If you don't remember it, because you probably haven't read it recently, He feels like going for a walk at night, and he doesn't really know how to see, so he draws a moon so he can see where he's going, and then he draws a straight path to go on. But then the straight path isn't really getting where he needs to go, so he wanders off the path. And then you spend about 50 pages going everywhere your imagination can go, right? And he is just exploring and pivoting and responding and dealing with every moment that comes. And in the end, he realizes what he needed the whole time was the moon, and that his window is usually in front of the moon, and that's how he goes back to bed. And so this doesn't mean that you don't go off the path when you look for that long-term strategy. You're going to need to do some of those explores, and we're having some great questions coming in, and I want to address this further later in the Q&A, that you're not going to make it be perfect, right? You're going to actually be experimenting and not always knowing what the impact is, what is the achievability. And so part of why we wanted to go into practice for a second is actually to talk about the lessons we learned, particularly, and we're going to start here with COVID and how we did that and what we can take away from that, as well as, again, one of these clients that we spent time with, just to show you how it shows up in an individual level. So that's what we're going to go through here, and then I'll be turning over in a second after that to our colleague Amy to talk about one real great method to navigate all this. I'll go to the next slide here. So this was a wonderful data. I looked all left and right. I was like, we need some data for this. We can't just conjecture a bunch of stuff. This comes from independent sector. And really what you're seeing here is a chart that, and this is nonprofits it's talking about, but again, I think translatable to everyone. These are permanent changes organizations made during the pandemic as of April 2023. When I say permanent changes, they're things people did during the pandemic to respond to the pandemic that lasted and were still going on in April 2023. So I was a little shocked to see this, that it was more than half the organizations had done a strategic planning process in the nonprofit sphere at that point. Kind of amazing, because as I've heard a lot from our colleagues right now, it's really hard to do strategic planning in times of crisis. And I find myself having to help them really push back on that idea. And it was really great to see that this was part of the response here. Also equally impressive, though, were those next 5 or 6 things, a lot of which are doing new programs, moving to online, yes, but just doing new programs, responding with something new to put out there, expanding with expanded advocacy efforts, whether that be advocacy politically or advocacy for your stakeholders or for your partners, and a new donor recruitment program. Or again, if you're not a nonprofit, you could say a new investor recruitment program, or a new stakeholder recruitment program, or a new volunteers for your team recruitment program. So to break this down a little bit, like we thought of 3 major themes. I'll jump to the next slide. The first theme that we saw in this data was that a great way to respond to times of instability is to lead people with intention. You can really use it, again, thinking of COVID as a map here, right? We all of a sudden we're all in virtual offices. So we had to figure out what that meant. And if those who were really strong and survived and came out thriving at the end would utilize that broader talent pool, would say, this is a great time to make our team more dispersed potentially, to be able to use independent contractors and volunteers and partners to get our work done. It also said it's time to really figure out if we're all going to be unstable. We need to prioritize well-being as an organization. Let's be strategic about this and become an organization that doesn't just prioritize well-being right now when things are kind of icky, but figures out how to do that as a system, as a way that we always honor that. To establish the norms of how we're going to work. We sometimes haven't written down how we all want to collaborate together, give feedback. This is a chance to get that settled and make sure it ties to what we're trying to accomplish. And to build cultural engagement structures. We use Slack. I imagine a lot of teams move to some virtual communication channel. One of my favorite things about Potrero Group is we do about every 2 months a Sweet 16 bracket around our favorite desserts, our favorite vegetables, our favorite films, and we have created whole Slack channels that are just about our culture and how we engage. And we've learned how to actually advance the ways that we're able to connect and celebrate each other outside of seeing each other, instead of just waiting for that to be the chance to really learn and grow. The second thing is experiment with impact delivery. This is why I brought up Harold and Purple Crayon. It's okay to draw the dragons and everything else. But again, thinking about that as experiments. And the important thing about experiments is that they should be things that can fail without sinking you. So build virtual connection points. You saw that a lot of organizations responded to COVID by doing that, but it's the same thing for other instability. Just because that was a little hard to see people in person, remember the other strength of virtual connection points is they're really low barriers to entry. To start putting out your product in a virtual way, to start figuring out your mission. It's a chance for you to say, I don't have the resources right now or the time to do the ways that we've delivered our mission or impact, but we can do it in other ways. And that might last and become a low barrier to entry, not low impact, highly feasible thing to do in the future. Also respond to what's happening. It encourages you to say, we need to be an organization through our strategy that's really nimble. This is us doing that, by the way, right? So this is, we're trying to show you that we're good at strategic planning. That's our long-term thing here. I'm not going to hide that, right? That's our play here as a business. But what we're actually doing is trying to be really useful to the moment and recognize that you all need these moments and these skills to talk about this and be here. So again, we're looking at our long-term strategy to grow this practice, but we're saying, wow, now we suddenly have a monthly webinar series. We didn't have that 2 months ago, but we started with one around our executive search practice to help people who've lost their jobs, unfortunately, this time. We've done this, and now it's built up, and it's a small, easy way to be there for our community, but engage our long-term strategy as well. On that note, this is a minimum viable product, right? We've put together this PowerPoint. We used some of our old ideas and some new ideas and came up with some things that now will show up if you hire us for a 6-month strategic plan. I'll guarantee you a couple of things Grace and Amy found in their research for this and I did are now going to be part of what we do for a much more deeply engaged thing. So we're testing out some ideas and we're having some good response in chat around what's working or not working for people, what they need. And leaning into partnerships. That's why we're all here right now. And I'm going to hold telling you more about that because Amy's going to dive deep on that in just a minute. And then respond with strength and innovation. So just again, a response to the organizations that just said, no, we're going to stand up in these times of instability. I'm not saying it's easy. I'm saying that it's the way to go forward. It was really great to see that data. That organization said, no, now is the time we're actually going to experiment with new programs and products. Now the time we're going to expand how we advocate. Now's the time we're going to appeal to new supporters and stakeholders with these other ways that we approach. I personally believe for those of us in the conservation sector or the climate sector, and both of which are very much feel under attack right now, that this is a moment where the private citizens of this country are going to rally together and say, and if you can appeal to them and say, we need your help now more than ever, you may actually gain a whole new level of support that then can come forward through this with you. And certainly, again, at the end, the data doesn't lie. Whether you do it with a consultant or do it on your own, whether it's 1 day or 6 months, engaging in your long-term strategy showed up as a way to step back and fight back and move yourself forward through instability. So bringing out just one of our clients we've done a strategic plan for, and this is a brand new strategic plan. I'm not going to say it's going to be successful or not. We don't know, but it's been really just a great example of this work. And Save Ellis Island is particularly meaningful to me. My great-grandmother came through Ellis Island. We also chose it because it's probably meaningful to a lot of folks. This is a nonprofit park partner of Ellis Island, and I will tell you about it in just a second here. So this is the balcony view of Save Ellis Island. It is the thing in the foreground. So if you've ever been to Ellis Island, you get on this boat, you go to the Statue of Liberty, you walk around, you get off the boat on Ellis Island, and you go to this building, and the building is right there in the background. It's actually that tall building in the distance, and it is the Immigration Museum, and it's wonderful, and you get a chance to see where people have stood in line to come to this country. You have that view of New York. You know what it was like, that big city right there. But you don't actually look to the other side of the island, and you actually don't even get to have access to it right now. And there are 29 buildings there that are in some disrepair. And so it's actually the realm of a second nonprofit partner to the National Park Service that's trying to really draw attention to these buildings that have not been rehabilitated for the most part, and that are not that central story of immigration. And there's a bunch of people showing up to this island every day that they're not being able to attract, and they have done a remarkable job. They've raised $70 million over a 25-year period, but that's not going to scratch the surface for 29 buildings to get them in a place where they could be fully open to the public. So right now, you can only go through the buildings with a hard hat on. So that's a literal balcony view, by the way. You can't get more balcony. That's taken from a helicopter. I couldn't get that view, but it really shows you an actual balcony view and how you can maybe reevaluate the opportunity of a place like this by looking at it from this perspective and saying, wow, people aren't seeing this now, but wow, look at New York right there. Look at the amount of space this takes on the island. Thanks, Amy. You can go to the next one. Clarify what's meaningful, right? So this is the next step we talked about once you're on that balcony view. There are some meaningful facts here. This is a 3.8 million visitors coming to this island. Right now, 30,000 are going to the side of Save Ellis Island. What an opportunity space. Most people on this call would die if they're in some sort of consumer business to have only 1% of the people that are just standing right next to where you're going right now. What an opportunity. As I got there and looked around, there's a green space. We call it the Quad with some of the best views in America. Yeah, that's the Statue of Liberty right there. Do you necessarily need to go in these buildings to enjoy them? These are American-style ruins, and I'll spoil the ending. One of the things Save Ellis Island did with its strategic plan that I love is it hired someone who had programmed art at the Colosseum and other ruins in Italy and said, how can you program art in this space to give us that same sense that maybe these buildings don't need to be fully rehabilitated, but just being outside them and being in the ghost of this space might tell us a story in a unique, creative, exploratory way. And last but not least is the public health history. This is a great piece of art that was already, again, I want to be clear, Save Ellis Island, some of these ideas were already in place. They had already had some artists come in and talk about this, but this is the hospital complex. Guess what? No surprise. Around this time that the Ellis Island was built and became an immigration station was when public health started in America, the way that we know it today. Guess where it probably started? Research showed us New York City, right? So this is actually now, if you think about this space in a new way, it's very different than what the other nonprofit wonderfully supports around the immigration journey. Now we have a public health journey on the same island. And then you can explore your resources. Left and right here, folks, these are two different places. One of them is a prison, one of them is a healthcare unit. The one on the left is Eastern State Penitentiary, not far away in Philadelphia. What this executive director did that I thought was brilliant is she called them and asked them about how they approached telling their history of the prison system. It is probably the 10th most visited spot in Philly. I don't have the data, but I used to live in Philadelphia as a tour guide, so I can kind of tell you that. But they reoriented themselves to being like, we're in the conversation of the prison system in the country. We want to be in conversation with Philadelphia and its tourist insights, but we want to really be part of this larger dialogue. And suddenly they became a much stronger and more important organization with way more resources. So looking outside yourself and exploring what's out there and having conversations with folks, this is the act like a network, right? They took the frame off and they looked farther. And then you can envision the path. And this is what we put into their strategic plan and what they're doing so well. This is that backcasting. Long term, no longer. Maybe it's now the goal to preserve these buildings, but the strategy is that we're going to repurpose them. We're going to have multi-use artistic workshop experiences. They're going to come alive and you're going to be able to go in and out of them in some ways and be able to really experiment and learn and interact with this world. It's still going to take some work to get there, but to do that in the medium term, maybe we can amplify to new audiences and build out that public health, do conferences where they stay across the ocean in a hotel for a medical society, and then they get to take the trip to this mecca of public health in the United States. And then in the short term, that first thing on the map becomes, let's build out our programming a little bit. Let's get from 1% to 2%. Let's add this person they brought in who's going to create some more artistic experiences. Use this quad space so that we don't have to just be wearing hard hats and just activate the people that are already there. And suddenly you see these beginning spots on the map in this unstable place they are. They're a small organization still trying to partner with the National Park Service, which has its complications, still trying to partner with the state of New Jersey, who's a partner. They have a lot of instability built in, but they have some choices today that will really build to that future. So this really gives you just one example of building that map. But what I love the most about Save Ellis Island is it really lives in this world of partnership. And if you know anything about Potrero Group, you know we're a partnership-driven organization, and we use that as an answer to a lot of things. We think no less of this. We explore it in our work, and we just want to encourage you to think about partnership across the organizations that could be your competitors, competitive peers, we like to call them, or real assets that you can both be driving towards the same level of impact. So I'll turn it over to my colleague, Amy, to talk a little bit about that in practice. And you can see we're going to nimbly switch the screen share to me here. So over to you, Amy.
Thank you so much, Daniel. I also had the pleasure of working with Save Ellis Island last year on their strategic plan, and it's just such a great model of success on how they've really leaned into partnership with National Park Service, their ferry operator, thinking about community-centric organizations, artists, etc. I could list on and on and on. But I do want to talk about partnership and its role in helping you navigate some of the complexities that you might be facing today. And we are hearing that, you know, the world is really challenging. There's so many moving pieces, so many external pressures that you might feel like you're working on your strategy and your organization alone, almost like you're on an island. That was a really bad joke. I'm going to move on. And in the middle of all of this, you're asked to deliver on your strategy to make your vision real. And you're probably asking, how do you bring strategy to life when the world is spinning in your organization and you're just trying to find solid grounds? Well, we want you to know that you don't have to do this alone. You do it with your partners, you find your allies, and you find pathways to move forward together. So let's start with a great example of partnership in action before we talk about partnership skills and best practices. One recent success story that we want to share is California State Parks, one of the largest and most diverse state parks systems in the country. For those who are coming in from out of California, you might not know, but for many years, the system has really struggled to serve its growing and diverse state with over 280 park units. And just a little over 5 years ago, Parks California was a newly formed statutory nonprofit partner who came into the picture to support the park agency and its hundreds of park partners, and really helping them to implement and think about system-wide strategies and change, especially navigating, so many moving pieces, so many different entities, agencies, organizations, communities to serve. So today, Parks California contributes to the resilience and of California state parks, from supporting sea level rise, thinking about how to plan for climate resilience going into the future, and acting quickly and responsibly to the CSU complex fire in Big Basin Redwood State Park a few years ago. We just want to highlight that this type of partnership has really been transformative and shows how that working together, leading together, can help create innovative programs, equitable access, and really nimble responses to externalities. So I'm going to stop talking so much about Parks California and welcome you to check out the 5-year anniversary report that Potrero Group helped produce in collaboration with Parks California. And there's a really wonderful dialogue in the beginning between Parks California CEO and the director of California State Parks. And just so much impact and success that they've made as a result of their model of leading together. And Grace has put that link in the chat. So how do we activate this type of partnership? Well, I'm going to ask you to just take a step back from looking at the broader scale and focus on what you can start doing today. So first, engage your partners as outside eyes, especially in complex and certain times that we're facing today. Those external perspectives can help you see knowledge gaps and turn your collaborators into co-creators. Like Daniel mentioned, a partner isn't just someone you collaborate with day to day. It can be someone like Eastern Penitentiary to save Ellis Islands. It could also be someone whose goals overlap with yours and where your success support theirs. So we want you to think about and look for mission-aligned, mutually invested, and people who are ready to build something with you that's going to last. Second, you need to understand who your partners are, and that starts with curiosity. You can, run the SWOT analysis all by yourself and look at market scans and pay, expensive dollars for that in the world. But some of the most valuable insights that we found through our Potrero Group consulting practice is talking to the people doing the work on the ground. We recommend approaching the relationship not like a transaction, but an ongoing dialogue. Explore the overlap in your missions, understand their motivations and their goals, because partnership at its core is really just about relationship building. And like any meaningful relationship, it's going to take work, it's going to take time, care, and communication. Lastly, now that you've created that foundation of trust with your partner, you can continue to learn from each other, share lessons in real time, and think creatively about how to build something together. So prior to being consulted at Potrero Group, I used to work in community mental health. And a tool that I have brought with me that has been surprisingly successful and powerful in our strategy work is called motivational interviewing. It's really about empathy, asking open-ended questions, and evoking responses from your partners to understand what are their motivations for change and what are their motivations for taking action. And from there, you can identify your shared goals and make a shared plan to take action and move forward together. We use this approach in our strategic planning process at Save Ellis Island. And we can go to the next slide. Thank you. One of their operating partners is Statue City Cruises, like Daniel mentioned. And through our interview, we were able to really open dialogue and create excitement between both Save Ellis Island and the ferry operator. You know, as we mentioned, it was close to 4 million annual visitors a year going to Ellis Island. Only 30,000 of them were going to the south side. And so we really dig deep to learn about what each organization wanted and why, and encourage them to continue that conversation. And eventually they were able to find a shared vision to increase visitorship to the south side. Before we even finalized our strategic plan, they were already co-developing ideas around website updates, as you can see on the right. They were thinking about joint branding efforts and creating a really clear value proposition to really funnel those visitors and people who were intrigued about Ellis Island to go to the south side and attend their hard hat tours. And this isn't because we told them to, it's because they were both motivated by a shared purpose. Thank you. So my key message to you all is listen deeply, not to gather input, but build a relationship, because strategy isn't static. It's not meant to be built in a vacuum or on an island by yourself. When you bring partners into the process, you're building collective strength, power, and a strong foundation to weather the storm together. And that's how we move strategy from paper to practice. At the end of the day, strategy is about the people. It's about how you enable them and excite them and offer them a clear, achievable path forward. So when people feel truly engaged and understand their role, strategy doesn't sit on a shelf. It moves, it breathes, it gets you results. So my parting message to you all, as you think about strategy and partnership, ask yourself, who are my partners? How am I listening to them? And how can we build something lasting together? And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Daniel, who's going to wrap up the segment and summarize all we talked about from strategy, long-term, short-term, and partnership.
Thank you, Amy. We're right here at the end, so if you haven't had a chance to think about your questions, now is a good time to tune me out for 30 seconds and think about a question you want to ask, put in chat. We have about 10 to 12 minutes and to go through, and we have one that we're ready to jump on, but there's room for other questions if you have them, or questions for each other as well, of course, or explorations or wonderings. But really, it really comes down to this step that we hope you take, which is 1, stop making excuses. And again, I want to turn to Amy and Grace and say, stop making excuses as well. We need to hear this just as much as anyone else in times of uncertainty. So this is something we're all trying to take on together. Get on that balcony, reserve that time, put yourself in that space, envision the path to the future, map it out, draw it out on the back of the napkin, bring your team together to lead a brainstorming, bring in a consultant if you need that outside eye, and make choices today that will make others thankful tomorrow. And I just want to pause on that. When we do that museum in the future, and we talked about 20 years from now, you're standing there looking back, one of the powerful things I like to bring into board retreats, for instance, when I work with a nonprofit board, is I say, hey, 20 years from now, when the board's sitting here, let's make today a day that they're going to look back on and be like, thank God that board thought about these things and talked about these things and got us on the road to here. That's what we're all in it for, right? It's for the people that will take our place in our organizations. It's for the people we're trying to impact who say thank you, that in this time of crisis, when they could have ducked and run, they thought about where they wanted to be in the future, and the future's now been built. Certainly, as we talk about climate and conservation, there's no better way to look at it than that. And that leads to these 5 bullet points, which is leading with intention, being clear that this is an opportunity to set up new ways of thinking and to build instead of respond, to experiment with delivery, give yourself room to try things that are going to fail, be that purple crayon, get back to the moon if you need to. Respond with strength, choose to be strong in this moment, even if it's hard. Use this to innovate. And last, certainly not least, find your partners. I think hopefully that's a resonant message for many, even if you don't consider yourself a quote partnership organization like some of our clients do. I always like to say there's partnership with a capital P, but there's partnership with a lowercase p, and that's actually the far more important partnership. That's the one that we can all access and think about in a more expansive way. So I'm just going to leave this next slide here and we'll move into Q&A. I just want to thank you all. You can quickly write down our emails. Maybe Amy or Grace, one of you can drop our emails in chat as well, so you can copy and paste them. We're all happy to hear from you, have follow-up. You can email all three of us. You can also, if you're interested in Potrero Group, inquire to us or at that general thing. QR codes are fun and fancy. If you're not signed up for our newsletter or LinkedIn, you'll get great resources like this. And I do want to promote our next webinar is being told by my managing director colleague, Steph Karp. Steph has her master's in writing from one of the most prestigious MFAs in the country and is kindly joined us, ragtag team of consultants, to be a strategy and search consultant. So she's really great at storytelling from a true writer storytelling perspective, but translating that to the change-making leaders here. So this is not necessarily just for your marketing team or branding team. We're not branding people. It's really about how anyone as a leader tells the storytelling of the change-making. And we'll have that dropped in chat as well if you want to click on that link right now and register. We'll put this slide back up at the end again, but before we do that, we want to switch into questions. So I think we have one question in the chat, and I'm happy to jump into that one. And then Grace and Amy, maybe you'll take a look as others come in, and feel free to respond to this as well. We had a question in chat from about, let me pull down the share here and repin my colleagues, get all that ready here. Okay, now we're all here. We had a question in the chat about how do you get people to be realistic about impact or resources? And I wanted to kind of wait to the end because I didn't want to spoil Amy's response to it, but I think the number way you get realistic, besides definitely using the tools that Grace put forward and forcing your team to talk about it, is to get outside yourselves. Someone else is going to need to tell you something. And this is why I think consultants are powerful. I'm a big fan of it, or else I wouldn't be doing it for work. You know, it's a chance for someone to come in and say, I've seen this other places, but you don't have to wait for us to do that. You need to make those calls to the people. You need to look at that network map and say to those people that are in similar but not exact circumstances as you, are you seeing what I'm seeing here? Am I being realistic about what my impact is or what a mission is? Am I being realistic about resources? What have you stumbled and gone through? So really, once you use that balcony time to kind of get a sense of things, using that balcony time to then test your ideas. This is why I'm at a conference right now. This is what we do at conferences, right? A lot of it is dance floor for sure, and we try to network, but if you don't use it just for networking, you use it to actually test and think and poke around, you'll find that networking is even more powerful because you're actually trying to get realistic about who you are and how you fit into the bigger picture. Anything else, Grace or Amy, you want to add to that?
I had a similar thought in getting out of your perspective, and we do a couple of things in our strategic planning process to help with this. First, in our discovery process, we interview a lot of people, both internally and externally. And so that really helps getting more perspectives about kind of level setting. What is the status of our resources? And then also, where can we make impact? It's important to interview internally to kind of get the realistic idea where the organization is, what resources you have, but then also interviewing externally. I think we find the most insightful insights from our external constituents that we talk to and saying, I really think the organization could do this in 5 years, or I see their impact on the community in this in 5 years. And bringing that back to the organization and talking through that is really great to kind of learn what's that level of impact. And then on the other side of that too, as Daniel said, another thing that we offer is research on comparable or aspirational organizations. So maybe organizations that are 5 years ahead of where you are at this point or something like that, and seeing what were the steps that they took to get to where they are. What was the resources that they had? What was the impact they were trying to achieve? Were they successful, and why or why not? So again, that can bring a little bit of realism of where you are now and trying to get to where you're trying to go.
We don't have any other questions, but Amy, anything else you want to add to that question or any of the thoughts we've had thus far?
Yeah, I was going to say both summarized it really well.
Great. I'm pausing for dramatic effect just to see if anything comes in, but I think one person put it really, great, we got one more. And I was gonna say, one person put it really nice, which is we all need a joke and a laugh, and we're all coming in a time of instability. So we recognize for some folks, you probably were dealing with other things as you go forward. We have a question from Richard. Are there facilitation techniques or planning tools you'd suggest to quickly assess which park functions can scale back temporarily while still supporting our park's core mission. So I'm going to reread that. And I'm also going to just elevate that, Richard, to I think a more broad thing as well, which is there a way to facilitate or planning tool, as you suggest, to just look at your organization, your park, your team, and say, what can you scale back and still support your mission? And again, I welcome folks in chat to do that. I'm turning to Grace and Amy since I spoke first last time, but I can jump in if you want to.
Yep, that's correct.
Grace?
My mind goes to, I shared a couple tools earlier, but the one that really comes to mind for me is that Moscow one, that must, should, could, or won't have. Again, it's very, very simple, but a very powerful tool to just really quickly just get on the table, draw down a whiteboard. Here are 4 categories. What are we doing? What are we trying to do? And what's most necessary? And really focusing on that first category of what is our must-haves. Getting a group of really smart people in a conversation in a simple framework like that has led to some really insightful decision making from our facilitations in the past.
Can you write that down in the chat? Like not all of what you said, but the model?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And we will also share the recording afterwards, which also has the model in there as well.
All right. Thank you.
Anything to add there, Amy? I think Grace said it well.
Yeah, I'm thinking about our work with History San Jose and just the beginning of our process, working with their board, their staff, interviewing. They have about a dozen affiliate partners. For those who don't know about History San Jose, there's this really amazing park in San Jose called History Park. Highly recommend just looking at their website or checking it out if you're ever in the area. And they, have this vision of telling stories that are traditionally unheard and really uplift the voices of their community, since they serve a really diverse community, and just listening to all the people involved and aligning on, what is that mission, align mission first, and then doing an internal scan and assessment of what capacity that they have, what staff that do they have, how are their board members stepping in, and then also understanding where the gaps are. And then at the end of our planning process, they ultimately had to make some difficult decisions on how they were going to run their events and be really strategic on how they're going to do that. And they can't tell every story of their community members. So why not let them be the storytellers themselves? So that helped alleviate some of the capacity tensions internally for their staff. That's just an example. I think Grace's tools that she shared earlier are really good starting points and frameworks to kind of get to the same results.
And I'll just add 2 things. One is Andrea just put a resource called Risk, which I'm sure you can find in quick Google, that sounds like it'd be really great and kind of along the lines of the 2 we shared. And then really just to simplify, Richard, to your question, in terms of facilitation, I say really at the end of the day, all good facilitation is just moving people around a room in different shapes. And what I mean by that is you have to embrace different learning styles, and we often skip that fact. So really making sure that if you're all coming together and you're having this discussion around which things can scale back in your business right now, give some space for people to write silently, to have that time, and that can even be beforehand, asking those questions so that, again, some learners take their time ahead of time, and then doing it live as well. Maybe review those notes or write them together and give that space. Then give space for small groups to take it and to play with it and think about it and make some proposals to the group and see what are having commonality, and only then bring in the full group to have a discussion, maybe make some decision, and then can repeat as much as you need to do that, and then break out again to look at it more deeply. Maybe take a day off, have some time to think about it. So as much as you can provide folks to be able to have that silent, contemplative part, that small group for those who necessarily aren't the ones that speak up in a big group, and the big group, and to have the facilitator really be responsible for making sure no voices dominate and no voices are underserved. Doesn't mean they have to pressure someone to talk if they don't want to. It just means we all agree that this person, in the case it's often me, will make sure that we all are able to provide our insights, and that's going to be part of our agreement as a room we come in. So sometimes the simplest is the best. These frameworks are certainly great ways to then jump in, but sometimes all you need is to make sure there's lots of different kinds of spaces and shapes for people. Andrea made it up for her work. All right, Andrea. Well, then you're going to have to create a one-pager and share that with Potrero Group, and we'll share it out, or create your own. If you're not a consultant already, create your own consulting business. We'd love to see it and learn more about it. Last question, if we have time. While we're waiting for that, though, if anyone wants one, Grace is going to pop up one more poll for you all. For those who are still here, we'd love for you to participate one more time. And as she does that, I'm going to ask you to fill that out. And I'm also just going to pop up one last time here in case you didn't get to do it before, or through the excellent Q&A and seeing the wonderful community that works at Potrero, you get excited and want to scan a QR code or sign up for our next webinar. Grace will also drop in chat one more time the webinar link there, so you can sign up for that too. And obviously in this poll, there's some good chance for feedback for us. Like we said, this is an experiment. We're learning, so please be honest. We're happy to take the negative feedback if it's there. And it's also a chance for you just to think about how this has changed you in what ways or whatnot. And last question of the poll, of course, we just want to make sure we continue to be of use in this moment of instability for many. Great. Andrea shared a tool, a link, I think, to get more of her support, which is great. Thank you for that. Excellent. We got almost all participation in. And I'm just going to end this poll and share it out. So it looks like we had some strong support of the content. Thank you for that. And some learning still, which is great. I think our numbers shifted just slightly up with long-term strategy, which is nice to see. Definitely have more 10s there. And the numbers shifted slightly up with short-term instability and how to address that, which is, I think, all you can ask for an hour and 15 minutes of your life, folks, with those big things. So feel proud about that. We also have some varied response here, but some strong push around leadership development and support. Storytelling, which we know is coming, organizational culture, board development. Not surprised with who's in the room. I imagine this attracted a lot of leaders who are thinking about those kind of key themes. As you may imagine, our last seminar, which had a lot of people looking for work, was very interested in networking, equitable hiring, et cetera. So it shows the diversity of this community and what it's going through. Thank you for that opportunity for feedback, and we'll capture that. And with that in mind, we wish you a wonderful rest of your day and good weekend, and look forward to continuing to collaborate with you and encourage you all to collaborate with each other as we move through what has been unstable for many folks here. Hope you had a little bit of a smile and a little bit of a journey and engagement and excitement to feel that you can get through this, and we're here to continue to support. You can always schedule a half hour with one of us, email us and ask for it. We're happy to give away that time for free, and we're of course happy to learn more about how we can support you in other ways. Thanks very much and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, everyone.